warm in here. I hope I don't blow too much more hot air into the space. So my name is Karen Tripp. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I'm also the executive director of a nonprofit called Cancer Companions. This is Kelly, my lovely assistant. Let's all give Kelly a hand. Yay! Yes, isn't that wonderful? And so, yes, I do have a PowerPoint, and it's fancy because he made it fancy for me. I will be sending it out to everybody who has registered on the app for this course. If you were like me and you just wandered in somewhere, that's okay. I guess you can still go and sign up for it on the app, or we have a clipboard that my lovely assistant will have at the end that you can just go old school and just give me your information and I'll make sure that you get that, all right? And as most of you probably know, is that they record this stuff too. But the odds are pretty good I didn't do the technology right, so we'll see how that ends up working out. All right, so usually I go around and kind of get a little idea, but I think we're too big a crowd for that. Come on in, help yourself, make yourself at home. We've got 2 seats right here in the middle. Let's do a raise of hands to kind of show me who's in the crowd a little bit. So let's see, if you're a school teacher, raise your hand for me. All right, music department, worship. Okay, IT. All right, children's ministry. All right, pastor. All right, and the best, volunteers. Woo, woo, woo! All right. Now, isn't that interesting how eclectic the crowd is? That how many different departments in your church are looking for volunteers? They all probably should be, if they're not, right? The power of volunteerism is an amazing thing, all on its own, out in the land of nonprofit world. But you take that and you place it into a church environment where we have the Holy Spirit to help us with servitude and being servants, then you just get an extra big bang. So we're going to take a look at some of that stuff, and I got some statistics and numbers and even for you guys. I'm fairly excited. Okay, lovely Kelly, thank you very much. So some of you, I believe there were 3 people that ended up completing a poll that I put out to you guys. I have no idea how you should have seen it or any of that. Kelly, if you go ahead and show him. So this is what I want to talk about. Is building volunteer teams worth my time? So I'm going to let you guys raise your hand again. So what's the cons? Which one of these are like, Karen, these are the reasons why I don't do this much, or I'm hesitant, or I dread looking for volunteers? They're hard to find. Raise your hand if they're hard to find. It's the same people doing all the work. It's easier if a staff person does the work. Yeah, if I want it done right, I'll just do it myself. They are often too difficult to work with. They're unreliable. Yes, they take more effort than they're worth. My church doesn't like to volunteer. Yeah, it's a plague. It's a plague, I understand, in your churches. That's it. So, let's look at the pros. Volunteers are powerful tools for growing your church. You need to stop thinking about volunteers as being the way to get the communion trays passed around. And you need to start thinking of them as being a powerful tool for church growth. The easy synopsis for that is because volunteer leaders are talkers. And they go out and they talk about the passion they have for the volunteering that they're doing at your church. It's not a weird thing. It's not because they're trained on how to go out and talk to people about what they're doing with volunteerism. It's what service and the Holy Spirit does to us, right? So this is where, this is a little synopsis of just kind of like, well, what's the deal then? That doesn't seem to be working in my world. First is that when you're connecting with volunteerisms, they need to be asked, not just informed. How many of us, well, cancer ministry is my stick, so I'll probably be talking about that a lot. So let's say you want to start a new cancer ministry. Well, let's put it in the bulletin and we'll make an announcement from church. Nobody wanted to. Nobody wants to do that. I guess we're not going to have a cancer ministry. That's informing people. That's not asking people. right? Asking people means we actually stop and brainstorm at a staff meeting over who we think might be a good volunteer for specific ministries, right? Because the people that are going to be good for cancer ministry may be terrible Sunday school teachers, but that doesn't mean that you don't still need both kinds of volunteers, all right? Equipped, not just approved. Sometimes you'll end up having, oh, yes, I want to be a volunteer. Oh, I found them. They want to be a volunteer. Okay, good. Bam, you're a volunteer. You know, I have just now approved you as an official volunteer. They need to be equipped. Even if they have, let's say that you end up having a nurse who decides they want to do some parish nurse work and they're going to do the blood pressure cuff, 2 Sundays a month. Now, does that really sound like we need to train her? Well, maybe. What kind of bedside manner does she have? What's she going to do on the Sundays that everybody expects her to be there? Then suddenly she gets sick and she can't be there. And so every volunteer role has to have some level of equipping that has to take place, even if it's just about the concept of volunteerism. Even if it's about, well, what do I do if somebody's blood pressure is up to 190? And so there's always going to be some type of equipping that we're doing. Connected, not just encouraged. Sometimes as our churches grow larger, but also sometimes in smaller churches where the staff is feeling overwhelmed, well, everybody can feel overwhelmed in any size church, there's this sense that, okay, we are going to encourage you to go do it. Oh, cancer ministry, great idea. You go. Shoo, go. Woohoo! Cheerleaders. That's not staying connected with them. That's not giving them any kind of level of an oversight. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm very big on volunteer leadership, and you'll see that as we talk. But that doesn't mean you get to totally unlatch yourself from the volunteers. Okay? And so trying to be able to find that I just don't want to be a cheerleader. I want to be able to be a mentor, a bouncing place where they can bounce ideas off us, where I can still end up providing some guidance, but I don't necessarily have to be in the role of their leader. Okay? All right. Does volunteers impact church growth? Look at these statistics. Growing churches, 1 leader for every 11 people in attendance. Churches that are currently growing, 1 leader, not a volunteer, a leader, a volunteer leader for every 11 people in attendance. So kind of do the math a little in your head. Next, Kel.
Can you explain, you said leader but not a volunteer?
Yes. So in other words, if you have a team of, let's say they do communion. It's a communion team of volunteers. You have a leader. Maybe you have a leader for each Sunday or however you do it. But there's a leader and then there's the people on the team. So that statistic is specifically talking about leadership. So what happens if the staff takes over the leadership of all their volunteers? What if they're not bringing up volunteer leaders? What they're doing is just having worker bees for the staff. You don't get that. You don't get that one. That's not yours, because this is asking specifically for leaders. Declining churches, 1 leader for every 19 people in attendance. Okay, Kel. When it comes to volunteers, my staff, are most likely to stay more engaged, attend most meetings and involved in most decisions, or stay less engaged, asking the volunteer teams to hold meetings and make most of the decisions. When I do this presentation on Zoom and we get the little poll so people can be anonymous and all, it is amazing how much the top one is what churches are doing. They just feel that need as a church staff that they have to stay engaged rather than finding a way to equip a volunteer leader to be able to manage the team. Okay, and so when we go back to those very first questions again, all the cons, what's all the reasons why you don't like volunteerism? A lot of it has to do because you just don't have the time and the energy to spend on them. Whereas what if what we're doing is ramping them up for them to be able to be a volunteer team with leaders, right? Okay. So, why am I up here talking about it? Cancer Companions, 10 years old. We have it's more than 404 now, but I don't know what the number is. Over 400 volunteers, trained volunteers, 74 different volunteer teams around the country in 24 different states. One of the blessings with COVID is that everybody figured out how to use Zoom. And so we have had an amazing epiphany around online contacts with people from everywhere, and so that's a super cool thing. So that's kind of who I am and why I've done that. So I have made lots and lots and lots and lots of mistakes with volunteers, and so those are the mistakes that I'm going to try to place before you so that you don't have to make them. Next, why do people volunteer? My opinion, significance. All right. They don't do it because Jesus tells them to and the Bible tells them to them, as much as they are hungry from some level of significance. I had a couple of slides in here that were about the impact of COVID on volunteerism, and outside of the church, it's exploding. Right? It's exploding because people are resonating with that concept of, oh my gosh, look at the needs. And so that's something for us within the church to kind of take a deep breath and say, there's something touching people's hearts out there, and what is it that can make a difference? People are looking for significance. I really do believe that volunteers are very much about wanting to make a difference. Just that very simply. Okay? Let me talk about what that might look like. Now, some of you may be sitting there saying, well, Karen, we just need greeters. We just need greeters. I just don't really know that greeters are necessarily going to be the kind of thing like running a cancer ministry group or something, I don't know. It's just shaking hands, saying hi, waving. You're not even shaking hands anymore, right? And yet, what if you approached people about being a greeter, talking about the statistics of greeters? Have you ever gone in and looked and seen the impact of having greeters and not having greeters in a church, and the difference that it makes when people exit on their exit polls? When they sit around and they say, nobody shook my hand, nobody talked to me the whole time I was in there. And so what is so significant about being a greeter? What is so significant about being the folks that are handling communion? What if you didn't have it? What if you didn't have volunteers to do communion? How significant is that role for them to be helping out on that communion team? And so any volunteer place that you're going, it's the person who's doing the PowerPoint clicking, right? Well, what if we didn't have that? Yeah, he's mad skill. So, those are things that you need to stop and think of. Don't think of, well, Karen, the things that I'm looking for are just mundane. Not if they're part of the kingdom, right? Not if it's part of the kingdom. It's all significance, but you have to grasp the significance. And with that, and you doing that, you're going to raise your appreciation of these volunteers. How many volunteers are happy to hear about that? Woo, woo. Okay, good. All right, next, my husband. Okay, the parable of the worker in the vineyard. Karen's synopsis. Okay, yeah, so this is, you'll know when I read it. So, just a little snippet so we're all on the same page. For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire workers for his vineyard. He agreed to pay them a denarius for the day and sent them into his vineyard. About 9 in the morning, he did the same thing. He went out again about noon, did the same thing. 3 in the afternoon, did the same thing. 5 in the afternoon, did the same thing. When evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to his foremen, call the workers and pay them their wages. Grumbles. That's probably not exactly a direct translation. These who were hired last worked only 1 hour. They said, and you have made them equal to us who have borne the burden of the work and the heat of the day. But he answered one of them, I am not being unfair to you, friend. Didn't you agree to work for a denarius? Take your pay and go. So the last will be first and the first will be last. Okay, so this line here is typically what the sermon is about, right? Is they're talking about the last and first, and it absolutely is that message. There is no question. But being a marriage and family therapist and kind of looking at relationships and communication and things, here's what I started to wonder. Bum. Thank you. Hey, he lives with me. Hey, me dancing around the house is just, a day in the park. So, think about this. Why are the harvest workers jealous of the market people? Will you be happier in the market not working or in the harvest working? Right? Think about that for a minute. They're all upset because they didn't get to hang out in the market all day and had to go and work in the vineyard. I could have gone and hung out in the market all day and only showed up for an hour. How great that would have been, hanging out in the market. So here's the big question. When you ask people to volunteer, do you feel like you are pulling them away from their life in the market? Or are you inviting them to the joys of bringing in the harvest? Oh my gosh, they're so busy. Oh my gosh. Well, they're already volunteering over there. Or, oh my gosh, they've got kids. Right? Oh, her husband's travels. We can talk ourselves out of inviting people to bring in the harvest every day. Every day. How many times do you sit and you think of somebody and you immediately explain to yourself why they should not come and work in the harvest? And I certainly am not going to ask them, because how horrendous would that be for me to go and ask them to come and work in the kingdom with me? Okay? Paradigm shifts. Okay, husband person. 4 steps to build significant volunteers. Number 1, find a true need that will have a person feel significant. So we've already talked about that a little bit. All right? The flip side of, okay, let's go and take, the things that we are thinking are mundane and find significance with them. The other flip side, I think, happens in churches too, which of course I find with cancer ministry. Like, oh my gosh, cancer ministry. Well, let's think of how many ways volunteers could screw that up. Let's see how many times that could turn into a hot mess, because that's a very sensitive place, isn't it? But what if they were trained? What if they were equipped? What if they were supported? What if instead of just being encouraged, somebody on staff stayed connected to them, right? And so it kind of goes back to that other side. Can I feel a little riskier about having boldly significant ministries that volunteers are in charge of or involved in? Right? Next, find teams of 3 and let them find their leaders. If you don't walk out of here with anything else but this is the thing I want you to get. This is what 400 volunteers have taught me. Because what do people usually do? Well, Karen, we're going to start that cancer ministry just as soon as I find a leader. So you start running around and you're saying, hey, you want to be part of this? Oh, it sounds great, I'll be part, but I don't want to lead. How about you? No, I don't want to lead. I don't want to lead. I don't want to lead, but I'll be a part of it. I'll be a part of it, but I don't want to lead. So don't make them the leader. Go ahead, find teams of 3. 2s are not enough. You need 3s or more, but you need 3s, and let them figure out who the leader is as you're equipping them. As you're training them and as you're equipping them, the leader will come forth. I promise you. All right? If you're going out and finding people that you know are engaging and are passionate about the significant thing that you've asked them to be involved with, the leader will come up. And if not, you're still back where you were and you're going, you want to be a leader? Want to be a leader. So why not try it, right? Equip them, all right? That we said a little bit about that even people you think are already trained to do the activity needed. But there's definitely something in the equipping process that also builds the team, right? You need to not look as equipping as just being an opportunity for us to be able to get them to get it right. Would it be better to sit down with 3 people and show them how to do the PowerPoint, or 1 at a time? Would be better with 3. For a lot of reasons, time management, but also because you're building a team. You're building some kind of connection. When one of them gets sick and can't end up showing up, instead of calling you, if they're really a team, they will call each other. And so part of equipping is doing that. And then ultimately, as we're ramping up, we get to a place where you're supposed to step back. A lot of times we'll end up having churches and they'll call up and they'll buy our starter kit and they're ready to go and all that. And first thing we do is we say, because with our starter kit, you get 3 free trainings. So, okay, so who are your 3 people going to be? And it's okay if a staff person comes and goes through the training and all, but at some point, they've got to hand it off. And so I teach my little mentor gal who works with all the teams, I'm like, you got to move through the church staff. Isn't that horrible that I'm talking about you guys that way? But it's really true. It's really true. You guys are so busy. You guys are so busy, you know? And whatever you're in charge, you're not waking up in the morning thinking about cancer ministry or thinking about, you know, any music or volunteers or those kind of things. But those volunteers might be, you know? That's their passion. That's their calling that you're encouraging them to be a part of. And so by you being able to move out of the way, you're going to have that opportunity for that volunteer leader to be able to lead. Because I guarantee you, they will not make decisions if you are in the room. They will not make decisions. You can write that one down too. They will not make decisions if you're in the room. They will turn to you for the decision making. One of the leadership things that I read, I don't know, somebody somewhere, you guys collect that stuff too, and basically said, don't do anything that somebody under you can do. Don't do anything that somebody else can do. Just don't do it, right? And so there's a certain part, if these are decisions that can be made by somebody else, right, then let them make it. Okay? Asking volunteers. Okay, so let's talk about what this looks like a little bit. So how do you ask them? What are you kind of putting into it? First thing I want to say that another tip that I have learned from other churches is that if you're going to put something in the bulletin and make an announcement, you have to do it 3 Sundays in a row. Okay? You got to do it 3 Sundays in a row. So, significance, right? So you want to be able to start with their why. When you're having a conversation with people about volunteering, the first thing you want to talk about them is why. Why would they be excited about being part of this ministry? What's their why? What is it about serving the church that excites you? What is it about, you know, being able to be involved in something like a sacrament, you know, and trying to be able to sift through their why, as well as for you to be able to bring in, like, most people that are greeters probably have no clue how significant that role is. It's huge, right? And so you being able to talk about, I'm looking for people that have this kind of significant role is part of it too. So you're doing it both ways. Why do you want to be in? Here's what I got that's so significant about it. Take some time ahead of time to go ahead and think about the roadblocks. Maybe their husband does travel. Maybe they got kids. You know, maybe they're had a hip replacement last year. I don't know. It's okay to think about the roadblocks, but it's okay to go ahead and kind of brush those aside ahead of time. Just by going ahead and kind of saying, oh, well, this is how we're going to be able to handle it. The training is online, or you can pick which Sunday you do it. Or, you know, we'll end up having you part of a team so that if you get sick or decide to take a trip, you can call and swap dates with somebody else on your team. Right? And so rather than waiting for the objection, you find ways as you're explaining the process, the ways that you're already managing to overcome their objections. Okay? Clear steps. Isn't that true for all of us? Right? That somehow or another we need to know this is how you make the decision. This is how you get started. This is what it will look like. You know, on such and such a date and time, you're going to do X, Y, or Z. You have to let me know by such and such. Whatever the clear steps are, try to keep the steps to 3 or 4. If there's 12 steps, it's not a good thing. And then we're back to training and equipping again. Make sure when you're talking to them, you're explaining what their responsibilities and expectations are in general. Time commitments, all of that we'll talk about in a minute. But especially the training equipment is two-sided, isn't it? On one hand, it's a responsibility, right? And we want to make sure that you understand that you have to complete this training and equipping process. But on the other hand, it's like, don't worry if you don't know how to do it, because we've got it figured out. And we're going to have people that are going to be able to train and equip you, and it's going to be grand and great. Okay? Cost. Cost could end up being time, could end up being money. It kind of just depends upon what the role is and what it is that you're asking them to do. Give them as much clarity as you can about that. And then the last thing is the mentorship and support. You really, really need to be able to make sure that they know that you're not going to cut them loose. And if it's a brand new ministry that you're starting, or the first times, maybe let's say that you're in that role where I show up to all the meetings. You need to find a way to transition yourself from leader to mentor, right? And so part of that is by announcing this is how we're going to go about doing it. So we have meetings once a month. I'm going to be here for this month, and then I'm going to lead the meeting. Next month I'm going to come, and Harry's going to lead the meeting, but I'm going to sit in. And then after that, Harry and I are going to get together the day before the meeting every month and talk about the meeting. And then he'll be here at the meeting and I won't be. So that we're transitioning what that process ends up looking like. Okay? So any questions about this piece of the puzzle? All right. We're going to do some small group work. I don't know, 2s or 3s, whatever. It looks like some of you guys are here kind of in clumps already, so that's okay too. You previously identified clumps may clump together. Here's what I want you to do. We're probably going to take at least a good 15 minutes with this, but I would love for you to start in the circle and kind of go around and pick whatever the thing is you're looking for volunteers for. All right? And take a little time and jot it down. What is so significant about it? How can I explain significance to them? Right? What are the roadblocks or the objections they're going to come up with that I can present ahead of time and say, oh, don't worry about it. The training is free. You don't have to pay for it. Or whatever you think might be the objections. What are the clear steps for them to be able to get started? How are they going to be trained and equipped? Costs. And what type of mentorship are they going to end up receiving and support from church staff? Okay? All right. And then if you get one person's done, just keep going around. And if you have time to get all 3 or 4 done, great. If not, then at least we've kind of gone through the process. On your mark, set, go. Let me turn that up. Is it doing it? Okay, I think it's happy. Yeah, so you constantly have to figure out the refreshing, because you get that volunteer. Oh my gosh, I got 3. Shoo, okay, that's done. Next decade, Well, what happens if we leave those people for 10 years? And some of them do get left for 10 years. But, some of them aren't going to make it 12 months. And so you have to already have in mind, well, I'm in 6 months going to start looking for additional people, right? And so that process of constantly saying we're looking for people to come to the harvest. We're looking for people to come to the harvest. It's important. Yes, ma'am?
What do you suggest for a smaller church where it's the same people basically in leadership and, now you can only serve this long, so now we just rotate to another spot?
Yes. Well, I think part of it is being able to shape your ministries around the significance that your church is looking for. In other words, to be able to have opportunity to talk with the people who are not volunteering and find out what significant thing would make it different in their world, right? And so that's part of like what I've said. Cancer is a great example. I have churches that'll sit there and they'll say, oh my gosh, Karen, I don't know that we're going to have any volunteers. We've already have 60 Stephen ministers. And I'm like, well, it may be that you've got some Stephen ministers that would like to get a little extra training and do this, and that would be great. But what you'll find is that there are people that aren't called to be Stephen ministers. They're called because of cancer. Their significance is, God told me while I was going through my cancer that I should give back. And I've been waiting and waiting to figure out how I'm going to get equipped and trained so that I can end up answering this call that I have on my heart, right? And it may be for who knows what, rocking babies or, who knows, right? And so being able to have that interaction, not to mention there's a lot of people that are waiting to be asked. They're waiting to be asked to be part of the group of people who volunteer and are the strength of the church. And so finding out what's up with the people that are not volunteering is important. Yes, ma'am.
I think it's a little jumping topics, but the one thing I've been trying to work on is how to not be a silo in asking volunteers, but knowing that the rest of my team and other lead volunteers understand all the answers to this, or where are we going? Because if I speak in significance, but somebody else is saying, oh, it's just that, or you're just, if they don't speak about it with significance, it can, you can begin to become divisive, and especially since I'm not the pastor, right? And so if our senior pastor says something about that role that maybe is different than what I'm saying,
yes,
that's just, it's not going to be as unified, and the volunteer can become a little bit more discouraged or confused, or so there's a lot of making sure to be working as a team so that we all see
yes,
the same answers to all of this.
everybody here, absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
I was going to say, because in our conversation, I mentioned that in part of the significance in sharing with somebody of why this is important, and why, but also adding, and this is why I'm asking you. If we're talking about readers, it's like you have such a gift with just talking to people, make them feel comfortable, and we need someone to be this first impression, coming to talking about the greater significance, but then how it ties to them. I think
Yes.
that's,
Yes. And using the word you and that is important. What if you were the reason somebody came back a second time? How much more significant can that be, right? Yes, ma'am.
So do you have any, tricks to having people be okay with someone other than the pastor asking them to be a volunteer? Well, just because I'm the pastor's wife, I shouldn't be doing it. I want the pastor to ask me. How do you get people to understand that we are part of the church as well as congregant, congregation members? The pastor shouldn't have to be doing every single position.
Right.
The pastor told me to call you.
Yeah, well, actually, that's kind of my answer. Credibility is given.
Yes.
Credibility is given. And so if whoever the person is, if it's the pastor or whoever that has the credibility, in order for you to have it, he has to give it to you, which means he has to publicly, repetitively explain to everybody what a value you are and what a resource you are and how blessed everyone is to be able to have any opportunity to work with you. And so that credibility, and even, oh my gosh, I don't know why you people would want to work with me when you can work with her, because I can't find my head most days, which of course is true. So that's a key.
In our conversation, we talked about the kind of a balance between significance and roadblocks too. And if you make something seem too significant, it can become a roadblock. Like,
yes, this is so big.
trying to get something
Yeah,
to run
that's
soundboard, and it's easy to say how significant the soundboard is, but someone sees that and says, "Oh, I don't want to be responsible."
right. Yeah, it's only $10,000 worth of equipment. Don't worry about it.
Be
Right.
careful there. There's a balance
Yes.
between the two.
Yes, agree. Thank you. Very good point.
I'll run a computer, but I won't run the soundboard.
How do you go about when you ask people to help and you feel like they're being forced? And maybe it's the way we ask, or like they look at you like, "Are you forcing me to do this?" And that's kind of as a person asking, you feel rejected because
Right.
you want them to serve, but you don't want to force them.
Right. Exactly. Well, I think that, we have to choose our words so it doesn't sound like we're coming across with pressure. I definitely think not expecting an answer at that moment. Please take some time to pray about it. I'm going to wait till next week to get back a hold of you, or make sure you know when you're getting back a hold of them, but give them time so that it isn't a give me an answer right now. And there's also being able to, oh my gosh, I just lost the other thought. It'll come back. So
Time bound to get out. How long? I think you're asking for a period of time.
Right. Well, it's being able to know when the pressure would be there. I don't know what I was going to say. It was a good one, though. Yes, ma'am.
How is it too tricky if because in our church we have a lot of, it's a small church, people, I don't want to be the leader.
Yes.
What about the co-leader, co-coordinator title role? Is that too dangerous to try try to go down there?
No, because discovering people's strengths is important. We actually, like I told you, we have a starter kit. We say, okay, you're going to go find a team of 3 to get started. They get free training. And here are the 3 different roles. Now, you guys go figure out who's going to be which role. And so they can end up claiming it. They can even take them and say, well, I'm going to do this, this, and this, but you do that, and I'll do this. I mean, they can even play with them that way if they want, you know. But once again, it's letting them be able to take their own ownership, right, to become their own leaders. So.
What do you do in the smaller ministries where there's really not 3 people needed? I'm trying to think of like maybe coffee shop. We have a small coffee shop or something like that.
Well, you'll want to be able to mix it in with another one. I mean, I think the way to think about it is the Christmas party. You know, I mean, you want your worship team to have a Christmas party, you want your school teachers to have a Christmas party, and somewhere the coffee lady's got to get invited to a Christmas party. And so she gets to be part of the hospitality greeters, or she gets to be part of the, not to mention, you need somebody when she gets sick and can't show up, you know. And so it kind of becomes, everybody should be part of a team, because, all right, some of you were probably people that went to high school because you loved going to school. I don't know. I've heard there were people like that. I loved going to school because I wanted to see my friends, right? And fortunately, I have very gregarious children, so that when they hit that middle school, I want to sleep, I don't want to go in, fortunately, they had friends at church. And so they wanted to go to church, and it wasn't because the sermons were so incredible, but it was because the girl was cute or whatever was going on, right? And I'm okay with that. As long as they're sitting in the room, it was all right with me. And so there's a certain part of volunteering you want to give them that. When I was growing up, the church that I grew up in had, it was just like well known that the choir were the coolest people. You know, they would have this choir room. We had those accordion doors. You remember those accordion doors? They had the accordion doors, and they would warm up, you know, before, and they would end up going to take their robes off and stuff afterwards. And they were just always laughing and always joking, and everybody could hear it, you know. And you knew they had the best Christmas party of any other group. And so there was just this thing that, wow, if you could be part of the choir, how cool would that be? We don't care if you can sing, right? You know, but I can remember that. And I was, you know, 8, 9 years old, and I understood how cool the choir was. And so there's a certain part you want your teams to be the cool team. You know, oh my gosh, they do this cookie thing at Christmas time that you're going to love, you know. I don't know, you know, but it's all right for them to be a team and for them to have that camaraderie. And you're going to need it if they're going to substitute for one another, right? If they're going to pick up the phone and call each other and say, hey, I can't make it, can you swap with me? They've got to know each other. They've got to have support for one another. And so you've got to find team building. All right? Anything else about the exercise? Okay. This is actually a video. I threw this in. It's about 3.5 minutes long. And then as I did it, I thought, you know, it's a little too, because that's what we do is we sell starter kits and all. It's a little too pitchy. And so anybody who would like to see it, but I do kind of go through these in 3.5 minutes, which is pretty incredible. And so anybody who wants to see it, just stay after and we'll play it. It's only 3.5 minutes. So, but now we have, okay, let's give this a try. All right, so I am going to recruit you guys as volunteers. All right, so my guess is that just about everybody, almost the planet, has had those times when they get that phone call, they get that text, they get that email that tells them that a friend, or maybe even worse, a loved one, has been diagnosed with cancer. And immediately it's yucky. It feels really, 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 really yucky. But if you dig down deep underneath all the yuck, you usually end up finding frustration. You find the sense of that, I want to do something. I want to make a difference. I want to figure out how I can help. And so we might end up making a casserole or write a very, very sweet note. And those are wonderful things to do. But what if you could do something that really ended up might make the person have a longer, higher quality life? Just might. So if you go into the cancer research and you study around, you end up finding out that cancer patients who have lower depression and lower anxiety can end up having longer, higher quality life. Well, at Cancer Companions, we've discovered that our program participants, 91% of them tell us that they have lower anxiety. 79% tell us that they have lower depression. Pretty cool. Now, if you go and you dive back into the studies again, you guys are probably not going to be surprised about this one. It tells us that, and they call it religion and spirituality. If you're ever going through research and you see an R/S, that's what they're referring to. That people who focus and practice religion and spirituality will possibly have, they always use cans and that kind of thing, can end up having longer, higher quality lives. So at Cancer Companions, what we do is we end up helping cancer patients have lower anxiety and lower depression by helping them focus on Christ. So I have a gift for you. This is a gift, and actually it says on it, a gift for you, but it's not a gift for you. This is a gift for you to be able to give someone else. A person who's coping with cancer. Could be a caregiver, could be a survivor. And on the back, you'll see there's a QR code. And what it does is it takes them to a little checklist where they check off a little bit about themselves. Lung cancer, and I have chemotherapy, and stress, and anxiety, and I need more joy and more hope. And we take that stuff and we put it in a database. And do you know what we end up finding out? We end up finding out that there's a formula that comes up specifically for that person. We call it our little toolbox, our Christian Cancer Toolbox. We stick it in an email. Did you guys get some? We stick it in an email, and then we send it to them. So that way, on those good cancer days, and even more so on those bad cancer days, they can end up, did you get one? They can end up having something that helps them to focus on Christ. That was it. All right? And so it was simple. It was short. It was clear. I gave you directions about what to be able to do. I equipped you about how to be able to do it, right? And trained you to do it. Of course, the big roadblock is the QR code, but can't do anything about that now. So just wanted you to get a little flavor of it. Okay, gorgeous husband, you need to go click for me. Any thoughts about that? Anything anybody wants to say about being able, and I guess that's part of it. I want you guys to have a sense that this doesn't have to be big belaboring stuff. You may be into stuff like, oh my God, if I don't get more people to do PowerPoint, or oh, if I can't get people to show up to do the fall, raking up every 10,000 leaves, well, I don't know what's going to happen. But it doesn't have to be a big belaboring ask. As long as you got that why that you're touching people with first. Yes?
I have a question. What if you're looking for like specific talent on the music?
Uh-huh.
So when they cast the new member, if it hasn't been asked, do you play an instrument? Do you sing? I feel like I've lost that person unless I end up sitting next to them in congregation. I go, oh, you need to try out for the teacher. Oh, what, you play drums? You better get them.
Yeah. Let me say something about church staff and volunteerism. I think volunteerism should be like every time you have a church staff meeting. And it's kind of like what we talked about in the beginning, that you want to be able to get people's sphere of influence, right? There was a gentleman, I don't think he was in the room, he came by me today, and one of the questions that I ask as people are walking by my table is, so do you know what happens at your church when if somebody gets diagnosed with cancer? And he just looked at me and he was like, no, somebody else handles that. That's not really my department. Well, what do we know? We know that everybody on your church staff has a sphere of influence, right? And the odds is that, let's say he's a youth leader. I don't know what he was, but let's say he's the youth leader, and one of the teenagers' grandparents gets diagnosed with cancer. Is that teenager going to go and tell the pastoral care guy? No. What about your second grade Sunday school teacher and her mom ended up getting diagnosed? Is she going to tell the pastoral care guy? No, she's probably going to tell the head of children's ministry. That's who she has a relationship with. That's who she's connected to. And so as we're looking for things like who knows how to sing, who plays an instrument, the odds are people on your staff have more of an inkling than you're going to have sneaking around sitting next to people, which is kind of creepy. No, but does that make sense? And literally what I do, when my starter kit, we have these little pieces of paper, and they have 3 lines on them, and it says, who do you know that would be a good volunteer for cancer ministry? And we ask them just to write the names down. They don't have to contact them. They don't have to do anything. They just have to give me the names. Now, I'll get back a hold of you to say, how do you think is the best way for me to talk to these people? But you just want to have that brainstorming feeling. And then the next staff meeting, they show up, and instead of being at music, they're going to end up looking for Sunday school teachers. The next staff meeting, they're going to show up, and they're going to be looking for something else. Not everybody is equipped for everything, and it's a good way to try to be able to get yourself out of that 80-20 thing, right? The same people doing this stuff all the time.
So just a couple of thoughts. I know for me in the past, I've focused too much on the task that I need a volunteer to do as opposed to the why, and so I really appreciated everything you've had to say. So I thank you. It's helped me refocus, I think, a lot of that. And the other thought was for whoever brought that up just now. I'm the worship director at our church, and so twice a year I'll usually put out an all-call, kind of like create a video, put it on Facebook, say, hey, I'm your worship director, I'm looking for these people. If you feel that's you, come to this meeting, and my entire team is there. And I start off with the why, right? And then we kind of separate out of who wants to do what. And then we kind of go through that process then of those different groups of people. So that's been my biggest thing, and thank you to Jesus, but in the last 2 years I've taken my team from 6 people to 25.
Lovely.
So it's really helped because those people who you may not have had that exposure with will see that I think I played guitar for a couple years. Let me just at least check it out, right?
Right.
And they'll come and listen to you if nothing else, So.
Right. And the other thing, especially with more skilled thing, is to have an entry-level thing that they can end up doing. I mean, I don't know. They all sing the Messiah together or something. I don't know. But, that there's something where this is a fun activity we're singing at. This is a fun activity where we're sharing our instruments or what we do so that it's, when in doubt, a potluck. I mean, come on. I mean, I'm sure there's a scripture about potluck somewhere. So, okay, so let me talk a little bit more about volunteerism ministries. There are some organizations out there like us that end up providing the equipping. And then there's other ones that are more like, these are things that you can end up pulling together and doing. That there isn't necessarily packages, at least not that I know of, that are out there. And so these are important things. And all of these that I listed here, I have very high impressions of. They really are. They're really good. The biggest thing, though, not all of them say that you need more than one volunteer. And I've run into people that have run grief groups for a decade, and I don't know how they're doing it, but I don't know how healthy that group is, right? So you really have to kind of be cognizant of kind of what you're asking from people. And then over here, that same kind of things. Oil change for single moms. I know churches that have done stuff like that. How cool is that? You just get a men's group that's meeting for, prayer every Friday morning and say, hey, will you guys go and help single moms out? Things like that. So those are just kind of those. Okay, Kel. Picture your church Facebook page with post after post of joyful volunteers serving the Lord. Yay, look how happy they are. Yay. Okay, do our Kermit wave. Okay, go ahead, Kel.
That's it? That's all you have now?
Sometimes he makes me do things 3 times. He'll say, what? What was that? And I'll do it again, and then I realize, oh, he just did that because I look like an idiot when I do that. And so then he'll try to make me do a 3rd time. Never. Don't ever do it a 3rd time. That's marital rules. So anyway, here's the actual references that, like I said, I'll send this out to everybody. And there's my contact information. So there is over on this shelf, over here, some Cancer Companion information if you'd like to be able to get more. There's a flyer. There's more of these kind of little cards if you've got more people with cancer that you'd like to give them to. My business card. And this is actually, the timing of this is incredible. once a year, Cancer Companions has a National Cancer Prayer Service that we do virtually, where people literally on Facebook and on Zoom give us prayer requests for cancer, and we pray for them right then and there. And so if you'd like to grab any of these for anybody that you think might attend that. And tomorrow, during the lunch, I'm going to be in the amphitheater praying for people with cancer. And so if you have loved ones and all, and you'd like to give me a prayer request for me to pray for them, or you would like to join me, that would be swell. I'll tell you what, I'll put the prayer requests on this side and the paperwork's on that side, and I will hang around as long as they'll let me. Oh, yes, another question?
I have a question. If people have, our church has always done just the standard time and talent, which covered all your basic church tasks. If people have things to share, a list they've created to give people other ways to express interest and passions in a larger format than asking, because they don't put in like one line of their time, and what other things are you interested in? But I'm just curious if people have anything they've successfully worked with that gives people choices, to give them ideas.
Right. I think our friends' issue about new members is part of it. I really think that onboarding new members should end up having a component where we're finding out enough about them and having enough of a conversation with them to take them straight from new member into a volunteer role. And that needs to be more than a checklist. So that's my first suggestion, yeah.
Are you recording this? Do we have access to your recording?
If I did it right, it takes them a week or two,
Okay.
but eventually they'll send a thing out that'll end up telling you that the videos are up.
Okay.
Absolutely. And guys, I love talking about this stuff. So please, my phone number is there. Pick up the phone and call me. We can chat, email me, ask me questions. If you'd like me to do a Zoom and talk to other people about this stuff with you on your staff or whatever, I'm happy to talk about doing that kind of thing too. All right?
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.